This is the Real Footy Podcast. Thanks for joining us to tip round 7. My name's Andrew Wu and I'm joined by Peter Ryan, who is letting everyone know that his 8-tip streak is now at 3 rounds. As everyone in this newsroom is aware, I think we need Pete to stop tipping winners.
Well, I'm not surprised that everyone's aware because I'm pretty proud of the fact that I have tipped 8 3 weeks in a row. But I was surprised as we were walking into this podcast that you weren't aware that I was leading, and you actually asked the question, who's leading?
Here we go.
Have you heard the song by Buffalo Tom, Tail Lights Fade? I think you should give it a listen, will we?
I'll put it to my Spotify list.
Yeah.
After the Real Footy Podcast as well. So, as Pete alluded to, the leaderboard, he's sitting right at the top on 39, ahead of Mark McGowan on 38 and John Perrick on 38, which prompted me to do a bit of research. This time last year.
Oh, no.
This time last year. Not so much if you're in the 8 now, you fall out of the 8. Yeah. Not that exercise, but I noticed that Matthew Stokes was leading at this point, and I think I was about 2 off in third spot. So
who won?
I can't quite remember now.
Well, the other thing to mention from last round is that Mark McGowan tipped 9. And I think he was the only one of the age tipsters to tip 9, so that always deserves a shout out because it is quite a feat and shows that he knows little about football.
Which is why you're leading the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Leading the,
exactly.
Anyway, we'll get to business. First game of the round, Friday night footy, St Kilda against Port Adelaide. Saints will start favourites. How do you see it?
Well, I think the Saints are justifiably favourites. They've been consistent and their form's really good. So you'd have to lock in St Kilda as your tip, particularly at Marvel Stadium. If it was in Adelaide, you'd actually give Port Adelaide a chance. But I think St Kilda are certainly someone you can trust and rely on at the moment, and they're only getting stronger with Jack Steele will be better for his run, and Tim Embry as well. So I like St Kilda. Not quite as confident as I was last week when we had the discussion about Carlton St Kilda, but I still think they'll beat Port Adelaide.
Yeah, I'm with you. But I think Port will give them a bigger test. I think Carlton were a little bit afraid to take on the game last week against Wilkie and Jack Sinclair, and I don't think Port will be doing that. I think they'll be taking the game right on, but I just can't see them beating St Kilda in Melbourne. But I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be pretty close. I think it'll be a good game of Friday night footy. But we're both tipping St Kilda. First game of Saturday afternoon sees the Brisbane Lions host the hapless Fremantle. I mean, they have been a real disappointment. I can't see how they win this week. Can you make a case for them?
No, I can't. No, I actually made a case for them last week, and that was the only tip I missed out on, as you remind everyone. No, and I was watching that game 10 minutes in on Friday night and thinking, how have I tipped Fremantle? And do you ever get that feeling 5 or 6 rounds in that you've thought, I actually haven't watched them enough to realise how badly they're going? And they were very ordinary against the Bulldogs, and you can't turn that sort of game style that's out of date and form around in a week, particularly against Brisbane, who are one of the form teams of the competition. So I think Brisbane will do it quite easily. I
actually feel quite sorry for Fremantle supporters because not only are their team losing, they have to watch them play every week and play this. It's really hard watching. I mean, because I tipped them last week, I was watching them with a bit of a keener eye, but it's so frustrating watching them play, and they're just chipping side to side, and they're not kicking forward. And
well, Jared Healy coined the phrase slow-mo Freo, which isn't a bad phrase for them. It's the way they play.
Yeah, and they've got a bit more speed in them. It's just, I think, Justin Longmuir.
Boring way to play, boring for the players and for the supporters. But Brisbane easily.
Yep. Same here. The game on Saturday afternoon is the Sydney Derby or the Battle of the Bridge, depending on whether you're red and white or orange. Swans get Tom McCartan back, I think I heard you say earlier today, but make sure you check the teams at theage.com.au later. Can you make a case for the Giants?
Absolutely. I'm tipping the Giants.
Ooh.
Yeah, I watched them play against Brisbane, and I suppose this is going on form and the last time you've seen the two teams competing, but Sydney obviously were awful against Geelong. they'll bounce back from that performance because they were so bad around the football and it was uncharacteristically Sydney. But the Giants, I was really impressed with the way they played against Brisbane. They pushed Brisbane and they had the game on their terms for quite a bit of that second half. They've got a lot of talent in the team. I reckon if Sam Taylor hadn't gone down, they may have got even closer. Now, he's not going to play this week, which is a huge loss for them because he is, the key player in their back line. But I just think they've got enough talent and Sydney's so poor or so out of form that the Giants will get them.
I'm going to give Sydney another chance. I don't think they could be.
Of course you are.
I don't think they could be as bad as they were last week.
No, they won't be. But the Giants, I reckon when you lose by close to 100 points, it's really difficult to win the next week because there's so many things wrong with your game.
Or maybe it steals them to.
Yeah, that's true. That's the optimistic way.
But I'm looking at it from an optimistic way. I think the Swans can't play like they did last week. And I think if you look at their season, that was a bit of an aberration. I don't think they've been building to that performance. I think their injuries hurt them. I think their midfield, which is still largely intact, they need to lift. I mean, they gave their defence no chance last week, an undermanned defence, no chance to defend, and they gave their forward line, which is also undermanned, no chance to score. Yeah, well,
the Giants confound me a little bit, which is why I'm tipping them Tom Green gets back, but they've got such talent. Toby Green, and you're well placed to comment on this, Toby Green, Josh Kelly, Jesse Hogan, Stephen Cornelio, Lockie Whitfield. Surely that's a team that should be competing for the 8.
Well, it's the same team they had last year, isn't it? And under different coaches last year, and they couldn't produce the goods. I'm thinking, I think Adam Kingsley's going all right so far. He's trying to. It takes a while to, I think, instill a new game plan, and I think most games this year they've been pretty honest. I think apart from that game against Essendon, where that was also a painstaking watch, where they just couldn't get things right. They'll be up for this game. I think they treat this game as like their grand final during the home and away season.
Tip the Giants if you want an upset. That would be my recommendation, and an upset that's a realistic chance of happening.
Yeah, well, I'm tipping the Swans by a couple of goals.
Yeah, so definitely tip the Giants.
Well, Petey's on top. Yeah. The twilight game on Saturday afternoon sees the Western Bulldogs take on Hawthorn, who were quite impressive last week, albeit not getting over the line. But you'd think the Western Bulldogs probably win this quite comfortably.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the operative words there is that Hawthorn didn't quite get over the line, which is what they did the week earlier against the Giants. So you don't tip teams that don't quite get over the line as a rule of thumb. So I think the Bulldogs will... Yeah, they'll make light work of Hawthorn. I don't think they'll necessarily, thrash them, but they'll definitely get the 4 points in a twilight game. We never used to use the word twilight until footy started playing at 3:40. Had you ever used that in your life before then?
Oh, I remember at primary school we had twilight cricket once, but no, twilight doesn't get
twilight
much.
Never gets a mention.
Well, actually, my daughter's netball team is called the Twilights.
Really?
So
yeah, well, there is a band.
A shout out to the Twilights out
there. You go.
But I mean, the Dogs have turned their season around, haven't they? Last month, it's been a really impressive revival, and their midfield's back up and going. And they're not going to Bontempelli's 200th game this week.
I was just going to say that they're not going to lose in the Bonds 200th.
No, they'll do it for their skipper. I think the Dogs win that. Kicking off Saturday night footy is game between Melbourne and North Melbourne. I think this is a pretty straightforward game to tip. Probably Melbourne by how much?
Yeah, you'd think so. Melbourne needs to work on a few things with their connection between their mids and their forwards, but North Melbourne have got to work on stopping opposition defences, attacks taking marks inside their defence. So this is the Clarkson Cup. He obviously played for Melbourne and North Melbourne, so there'll be something around that. I'm not sure what, but
maybe the Ben Brown Cup
or the Ben Brown Cup. That's a really good. That's probably a better comparison. So Melbourne easily.
Yeah, I think the D's win this comfortably. I don't think it'll be one-way traffic though. I think North will probably be up for this one after a few poor performances. But I mean, if they can make this a 5-goal game, I think they'd done pretty well, and I think North fans would be expecting too much more from this one. The other game on Saturday night is out in Perth, the West Coast Eagles, the very undermanned West Coast Eagles against Carlton.
Come on, will you tell us what you think about Carlton's chances of winning?
Oh, well
is this a line in the sand game?
I don't think this game's really all that relevant from a tipping point of view because everyone's going to tip Carlton.
That's true.
And if you're not going to tip Carlton, you might be the 1 in 100 people who tip the Eagles, and you'll probably miss a tip. You'll probably lose one. I just don't think this one's worth the risk. I mean, West Coast just got too many players out, don't they?
Yeah, no, they're bereft of all their talent and experience. Even their skipper's gone out. Shuey, who's had a wretched run with injuries, it just tells the story of West Coast for the last, 1 to 2 years. Carlton will win. Well, they have to win.
Oh, they have
to. It'll be a disaster if they don't win.
Oh, there'll be all sorts of
recriminations.
That's the word I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely.
Icon Park next week. So
but they'll get it done, and as you say, it's just a safe tip. Just lock in the Blues.
Yeah, I reckon with a 6-day break going into this game and another 6-day break afterwards, I think they just want to get the business done and get home with a relatively clean bill of health. So both of us tipping Carlton, no surprise there.
Yep.
First game on Sunday afternoon. It's quite an interesting one, actually. Essendon against Geelong. We probably wouldn't have thought that at the start of the season, but Essendon have been quite impressive in the first 6 rounds, and Geelong are starting to turn the corner.
Yep, the Scott brothers coaching against each other again. I'm really looking forward to this game. Geelong are back in the sort of form that took them to the premiership, albeit they haven't beaten much opposition. So this will be a really good test for them to see exactly whether they've got back on track for this season, because Essendon are, as you say, worthy opposition. They'll have Zach Merritt back, which is a big bonus. They're really good Anzac Day. Collingwood, that was a pretty remarkable win to actually overcome Essendon, but for 3 quarters Essendon were the better team, and I can see that they've got a system under Brad Scott that's going to hold up. So look, I'm tipping Geelong reasonably confidently, but I think there is a case you could make for Essendon, particularly around their midfield, being able to get on top of Geelong's midfield and then set up behind the ball and lock it in, which may trouble Geelong for a significant part of the game.
I think we'll find out a bit about both clubs in this game because, Geelong in the last few weeks have beaten, their best win was against a very undermanned Sydney with their spine taken out of them. And we see Essendon against another top quality side. The last 2 weeks they've been very good, haven't they? Even though they didn't quite get over the line against the Pies, but they were very impressive against Melbourne the week before. And we haven't really seen any of those defensive frailties come through in Essendon's game in terms of being able to defend ball movement.
No, stoppages were what killed them.
Which plagued them last year under
Ben
Rutten.
Stoppages killed them against Collingwood. I think Collingwood kicked 5 goals from stoppages in the last quarter. And remember, it's the time-honoured country round too, with Essendon and Geelong getting together. Kevin Sheedy themed rounds.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame that's
Victoria.
Not the 320 game this week. Or maybe there is a reason behind it being 110. I'm not entirely sure, but I would have thought Essendon and Geelong would be a better free-to-air TV game than the next one, which we're going to preview, which is Richmond and Gold Coast.
Just hold on, were you tipping Geelong? Definitely?
Yes, I'm tipping Geelong.
Yeah. Richmond Gold Coast. Well, this is another one. Richmond I'm tipping only because it's in Melbourne, and that's always a fraught way to tip, because Gold Coast I think will finish higher on the ladder than Richmond this year, and Richmond have got, well, we all know they've got significant issues injury-wise, and they're missing Toby Nankervis and Tom Lynch. And really, that was a huge difference against Melbourne. Again, they were pretty good for 3 quarters, but couldn't get the job done. I just think on the MCG against Gold Coast, actually it's at Marvel Stadium.
Damien Hardwick would be loving it.
Yeah. No, well, Marvel Stadium. Oh, that's actually a black mark against Richmond because they don't play very well there. They lost to North Melbourne. So take that back. That's just giving me cause for worry there. Richmond still, because it's in Melbourne and they can't afford to lose. And Gold Coast, as we know, have been okay, but they haven't really got the job done when the pressure's been on.
Yeah, this is a really tricky game. For me, I really, really want to tip Gold Coast. I really want to tip them.
Do it, Wooey. You can get from 34 to 35.
But it is too big a risk, I think, from it's one of my golden rules. I think it's there'll be too many people tipping Richmond. I think on that case, it's more a tactical reason why I'm going to tip Richmond.
Imagine being a jockey riding a horse, like you would sit there until the 200. No, I won't move now. Oh, sorry, race over.
I'll be the one flashing
You're
home
so safe.
when the race is 1-0.
Yeah.
But I mean,
go for Gold Coast. Come on, Wooey.
Okay, I will. I'm going to do it. You talked me into it. This is good for the punters, good for our ratings.
Yeah.
And I will overlook Took Miller's injury. But one stat which actually will give me a bit more confidence going into the game is that Richmond have not won at Docklands since round 9, 2021.
Is that right?
They've drawn one game and lost 4. So they don't play that ground well, which explains why Damien Hardwick doesn't like the ground.
Well, I think that And
the Richmond fans, will they turn up? I mean, it's not that far away from the MCG, really. It's only an extra 2 stops.
They won't. They don't love it, do they? And that's fair enough. I mean, supporters love their home ground. The other thing they should do is have Carmichael Hunt do go around the boundary in a car just to fire up the Tiger masses. Remember they had that shocking record against the Suns for a while?
Well, I mean, the last time they played with Noah Anderson kicking the goal after the siren.
So, last chance. Gold Coast or Richmond?
I am going to do it for the fans and give Gold Coast
a go.
So this is the mindless gamesmanship from someone who's sitting at the top of the table.
Exactly.
And the final game of the round, and probably the best game of the round, Adelaide against Collingwood. Now, we're going to see a full house at Adelaide Oval. Collingwood off a 5-day break this time.
Yep.
Who are you tipping?
I'm tipping Collingwood because you tip good teams who have shown themselves to be able to win big games repeatedly. You stick with those teams. So I'm going to tip with Collingwood, but it's a 50-50 game. There's no doubt about that. 5-day break in Adelaide. Adelaide had their little down patch against Hawthorn, but I don't think that's indicative of where they're at. I think they're they're going to be contending for the 8 well and truly, and they will want to get hold of Collingwood on their home deck. It's a little bit like Carlton a couple of weeks ago. It's a real, in terms of the Crows playing Carlton, it's a real
ambush, wasn't it? Gather round.
That was an ambush for gather round, but this is an opportunity for Adelaide to just say we've not arrived, but we are a genuine contender this year.
They went close to beating the Pies last year. I often look at those
Everyone
results.
Went close to beating the Pies last year.
That's very true. But I mean, Adelaide weren't that good a side last year, and they've clearly taken a step forward this year. So they've become a genuine finals contender. I think they'll really give the 8 a shake.
Yep.
So there's a real strong case to make for them to beat Collingwood, particularly with their forward line.
Yep.
Tex Walker, Darcy Fogarty, I mean, they can really stretch Collingwood's defence, who are missing quite a few players.
Yep.
So all that said, I'm going to toss a coin and go with the proven quantity. I think I'll stick with Collingwood. But there's not much confidence for this game. I think it's going to be a really good one to watch and a good way to finish the weekend.
Absolutely.
That's all for today. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you via email, realfootypod@theage.com.au. Check out the rest of the expert tips at theage.com.au/AFL. The podcast will be back next Monday. Catch you then and hope your club wins.